Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Starfield video. So, as you may have heard, the game got its ESRB rating very recently, so there's a whole bunch of little tidbits of information about what we can expect to see in the game in here, as well as some interesting recent online reactions and a couple of other cool tidbits to talk about. So, let's jump in, have a natter about this. Okay, so ESRB rating for Starfield. This is pretty cool. It's a couple of days ago this came out, and there's a bit of online chatter about it. I thought I'd throw my 2 cents into the ring or some variation, because there's some fun stuff in here, and there's some really weird reactions, as I say. So, for those who don't know, the ESRB is the American ratings board for entertainment software, basically. It literally means Entertainment Software Rating Board. Their remit is to basically make sure parents know what their children are playing. If you are interested in learning a whole lot more about them, though, very interesting documentary a couple of years ago now by NoClip here on YouTube. So just look up NoClip and their ESRB documentary, because it's actually really more interesting than you might think. I realise I'm not selling it well, but, take my word for it, yeah? So, the rating. First up, Starfield has gotten a mature 17+ rating. So, this is upper end, and it's basically where most of Bethesda's games land. The Fallout stuff, the Skyrim, stuff like that. Bethesda don't really make teen-rated or, family-rated, children's-rated games. That's not really their MO. It's not really surprising that we get a mature rating. That's about where we'd expect. So, there's a whole load of extra information on here if you want to check it out. I will link down below if you want to find it. And yeah, we've got a nice paragraph here that tells us a bunch of stuff about the game. So, some of it's new, some of it isn't. So, this is an open-world, role-playing game in which players assume the role of a miner tasked with finding artifacts across the galaxy. So, first sentence, the role of a miner. Now, this is interesting because it's like, okay, so the character was probably a miner first. So, how does that tie into the character backgrounds we've seen before? So you see there's the clips we saw from last summer, for example, talk about, say, having a diplomatic background, or there's things like bounty hunter in there and other stuff. So it makes it seem like if they were a miner, at a guess, is probably just your most recent job at the start of the game. I suspect you probably had a life, a whole bunch of different career choices in the past and then become a miner, which is how you probably, guessing here, find an artifact which starts you off on the main artifact-related storyline. That would make sense. It's not a great leap to imagine that. It's speculatory, of course, but that probably fits. It also would explain how you can have multiple different backgrounds and still have the sort of factual statement of being a miner here, which is, the two things are in a bit of contrast. So the idea that it's the most recent job kind of fits with that, I think. So it's from a first third-person perspective. Yep, we know that. That's always the case for Bethesda games. Players interact with various characters, complete quests, and search for supplies while battling enemies, e.g. humans, robots, and alien creatures. Now, alien creatures is interesting. Alien creatures, the word creatures to my mind leans towards non-sentient. So, non-Earth-based animals, basically, is what I'm thinking here, as opposed to saying intelligent life. Doesn't mean there won't be intelligent life. The whole artifacts thing kind of implies that maybe possibly there at least at some point in the past was, but I don't think we're going to be bumping into many aliens in the streets, to be honest. I don't think that's the vibe that we're getting from what we've seen so far. They could have somehow managed to throw us a curveball on that, but I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the plan. But we shall see. Players use futuristic guns, lasers, axes, explosives to kill enemies. So we're going to come back to that word there, axes. Thus far, as far as I am aware, we haven't seen any melee combat in Starfield at all in any of the footage we've seen so far. So if there's axes being referred to there as a weapon, that means there is melee combat in it. Yeah, as to pros and cons, low amounts of melee combat sort of made sense. Looking forward to a sci-fi game. But, and the same thing when you look at Fallout that's got melee combat in it, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because everybody's using guns and laser rifles. Same kind of questions apply here. On the other hand, melee combat's kind of fun in games, so that's why it tends to live on in games. So it does look like it's going to be a thing, so that's interesting. And who knows, the showcase is due on the 11th of June, so that's about 4 weeks as of recording this. So definitely looking forward to that. It'll be, I think, 4 weeks this coming Sunday. So, yeah, maybe we'll see a bit more about stuff like this when that showcase actually happens. And you can bet I'm going to be all over that. So, combat is fast-paced with frequent gunfire, cries of pain, and explosions. Fairly standard video game combat from the sound of that, then. Attacks on some enemies can result in blood spatter effects. Several environments depict blood stains on the ground around corpses. So, some enemies and several environments. So, basically, that probably means some enemies being organic things. If you're fighting robots, they're probably not doing a whole lot of bleeding. You might get like internal fluid, maybe, coolant or whatever spraying. That could be a thing. I'm going to guess it's probably not, but it could be. But blood it isn't. So that's what you'd expect. Several environments depict bloodstains on the ground around corpses. So we'll be coming across places where people have been killed before we arrive there. If we go back to last summer's showcase and you see the pirates at the beginning there that have taken over this place on Crete, I believe the moon was called, then in there you will see there's a fairly good chance that they've come in and not been particularly friendly to anybody who may have been there before they arrived, so there might well be bodies around there. I can't remember any off the top of my head now I think about it, but that kind of context, it would not be terribly surprising to find that they'd murdered a few people, so it's not a great leap or surprise this, but it's cool to see. So, moving on, the game contains some suggestive material in the dialogue, and after sharing a bed with characters, e.g., life is a sexually transmitted disease that's 100% fatal, and I'm all for getting a little while, but next time let's try it without the jetpacks. And talk about seeing stars, phew, that was amazing. So this is, how am I going to phrase this? Post-coital pillow talk? I think that's probably a good way of putting it. For having some fun with language. And I wanted to pick this up because in Bethesda's previous games, you could have relationships with characters, but it tended never to get physical, basically. They just didn't get included in the game, which is fine. And if you go back to a video from a few weeks back, the Australian rating this game got said no sex. So this is kind of in contrast. So have they added some? I think probably not. I think this is a case of, you'll go into your cabin and the doors will close, or it'll fade to black, or some variation on that, and you won't actually see anything on the screen. But you'll maybe hear some conversation at the end. This is sort of what this seems to be implying to me. I'm not going to name any publications here, because they probably don't deserve getting named for what they've gone for here, but yeah, there's some reactions out there suggesting this is some of the worst sex-orientated dialogue they've ever seen. No, it isn't. Actually, it's kind of spot on in a way. Yeah, it's silly, it's tongue-in-cheek, it's a bit daft, and it's probably not going to win any Oscars or BAFTAs or whatever for its voice actors. But that's not really the point, is it? It's like, post-sex pillow talk. It's not the height of... it's not Shakespeare, and it's not meant to be. On the other hand, daft, weird, bad jokes after sex really does fit with comfortable long-term relationships. I'm sure there's a few people out there know what I'm talking about there. And saying stupid stuff before the blood goes back that way is also kind of a thing, I suppose. So this is kind of fine. It's daft, it's tongue-in-cheek, and it's actually kind of more realistic than it's getting credit for on the old internet at the minute. So I actually quite like this. And yeah, I think that's a lot of fun. And hey, it's funny, and there's always room in life for funny. So, especially around sex. If you've seen Dogma, you know what I'm talking about. So, moving on from that little rant, we move on to drugs. Any rock and roll to add to just get the trifecta going on here? Doesn't look like. Oh well. So, there is a fictional drug, Aurora, which we have heard about before, and it's prominent in the game with a section involving players' characters working in an illicit drug lab. Okay, so this is a story beat we didn't know about before. Aurora we've heard of. It comes from Xion, what seems to be mostly water world, pleasure world. It's got a city on stilts that was used for fishing, and the company that set up to fish there later discovered that the fish they were harvesting had psychogenic properties, and selling drugs made from fish was better than selling the fish itself, on the profit side of things anyway. As I understand it, this drug is illegal everywhere else in the galaxy, the settled systems, the bit of it that we'll be exploring in Starfield, but not on Xion. So that's probably where this will be focused on. It's not surprising that the story is going to take us there at some point, and there will be some involvement. That's cool. But this drug is going to be present, and I would be surprised, given Bethesda's previous games, if there aren't elements of players being able to consume the aforementioned substance, given what happens in Fallout, and to a much lesser, but still existing degree in Skyrim as well. So yeah, drug-based content is not particularly out of the ordinary for a Bethesda game. This is interesting, and it's cool to get a little bit more info in here. And we've actually got a little bit more right after that, which would have been good for me to read on about. Players can also obtain Aurora by stealing or buying it from vendors. Consuming it results in a distortion effect on the screen. That is interesting. Doesn't tell us a lot more about it. If you take, say, Jet in Fallout, it creates a distortion effect on the screen, but it also slows time and makes you kind of act like you're moving faster. You know, it speeds up your reactions. It doesn't imply anything of that effect here, so that's interesting because the effect of taking drugs is part of the issue the Australian board sometimes have with drug content in games. They don't want it to be seen as a good thing to do. So the fact it's not mentioned here makes me wonder if maybe it doesn't have any additional effect other than sort of story RP function, maybe. Or maybe it does and they just haven't mentioned it. But it's interesting. The Australian ratings board didn't go too heavy on the drug thing. They didn't seem to have too much of a problem, which makes me think maybe it doesn't have that much of an effect. Who knows? But it's also highly fictionalized as well, so I guess we'll find out possibly in June or failing that in September when the game launches. And the last thing we have is some swearing. Basically, they've quoted the words fuck and the word bullshit. Which is actually a surprisingly small selection, really. There may be more, there may not. I'm guessing that, at least in a broad sample that the ESRB checked out, there probably wasn't that much. But that's interesting. So, yeah. All in all, some interesting insights. We've got a little bit of insight into combat. The big takeaway for me is that this gets the same sort of vibe as you would expect from a Bethesda sci-fi game. It's got their DNA, it's got their fingerprint, it's got their taste and style in it, and that's how it's going to pan out. That's what you'd expect, which is cool. Confirmation of your role prior to the start of the game, or at the start of the game as a miner, is interesting. Confirmation of melee combat is nice as well. Again, I mean, I touched on the whole using melee weapons in an Age of Ray Guns thing, which has been, frankly, a conversation since Star Wars, and probably before that as well. But it's cool to know that's in there. It's always good fun to hit things with axes. Interesting, it only mentions axes. I wonder if those are the only melee weapons available. We will see, I guess. Anything else on there that I want to pick up? Yeah, I mean, there's that whole sex thing, which I think there's a lot of overblown reactions out there. But to be fair, there are people on the internet commenting that the reactions are overblown as well. I'm not the only person who has thought this, so fair. But yeah, I think that's going to be fun. The first line there is a little bit weird, though. And the drug content is about where we'd expect it as well, and the occasional bit of swearing is also consistent. So yeah, interesting, but nice to have a couple of little snippets of information we didn't previously have, and looking forward to trying things out and exploring it and getting into Starfield, and also finding out a whole bunch more this summer, which I will be all over covering that as soon as we do get our hands on that information in June. Yeah, 11th of June for the showcase. We should get a decent look at the game prior to its launch, which will be 3.5 months later. So definitely hyped up for that, looking forward to it. So, do hope you guys found this interesting and informative. If you did, please do drop subs and likes and hit that notification bell. I very much appreciate it. It really helps out. Down below the video as well, you can find social media links, merch store, channel memberships, all that good stuff on the buttons down there. If you would like to check it out, that massively helps out. I really appreciate it. And we are, of course, continuing our playing of Fallout 76. That's a big thing we do over here. And we are playing Redfall at the minute, which has been good fun on live streams. So if you get a chance to join us for either of those, do drop on by. And of course, when the time comes, we'll be all over Starfield as well. I cannot wait to start playing this game too. So, would love to see you there. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you all very soon.